5 Americans who were wrongfully imprisoned in Iran are now back on U.S. soil, landing at a military base this morning in Virginia. They were freed after the U.S. released 5 Iranians from American custody and agreed to allow Tehran access to $6 billion in oil revenue that had been frozen. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
Overnight, 5 Americans locked up for years in Iran, finally free. A long journey home for the U.S. citizens after years of delicate negotiations for their release.
As far as we know, they're all in relatively good health.
The prisoners first boarded a charter plane in Tehran, then hours later landed in Doha. Some of them seen smiling. 3 of them, all dual Iranian-American citizens, sharing an embrace as they walked into the terminal. The other 2 Americans have asked for privacy and have not been identified.
I spoke to them after they landed in Doha. I can tell you that it was, for them, for me, an emotional conversation.
Siamak Namazi, who the U.S. says was arrested on false espionage charges, writing, "For almost 8 years, I have been dreaming of this day," adding he can't wait to get to an Apple store. "I am dying to find out what gadgets now exist."
He's missed 8 years of the most productive years of his life. He wants to be married. He wants to have kids.
Still, the swap is controversial. In addition to the U.S. and Iran exchanging 5 prisoners, the Biden administration also unlocking $6 billion in Iranian money frozen by U.S. sanctions. The White House says Iran can only use it for things like food and medicine, with U.S. officials approving each transaction. But Iran's president told NBC's Lester Holt last week,
"We will decide, the Islamic Republic of Iran will decide to spend it wherever we need it."
Republicans arguing the money was essentially a ransom.
Unfortunately, the deal that secured their release may very well be the latest example of President Biden rewarding and incentivizing Tehran's bad behavior.
Joining us now, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Roger Carstens, who was on the plane home. And we'll give the first question to Elise Jordan. Elise?
That had to just be an incredible plane ride. Can you just talk about what these released prisoners, what they were saying about their experience, how they felt to be free again?
Yeah, Lisa, thank you for that question. You know, it was great. Before they got on the plane, they had a chance to talk to Secretary of State Tony Blinken. I spent about 10 minutes talking to each one of them and letting them know how grateful he was to have them home and that the president was likely or equally grateful. Then we got on the plane, and what was interesting is I got to watch from a distance 5 people have the first unfettered, unmonitored conversations that they've been allowed to have in some cases years. So they talked with each other. I had a chance to talk to each one individually. And I think my impression was that of people that were overjoyed, experiencing a freedom that had been denied them for so long, but also reconnecting and connecting with each other. There seemed to be a certain community that was kind of generated on that plane that was good to watch and good to participate in.
So, Roger, you just heard some of the pushback from Republicans, Mitch McConnell among them, who obviously welcome home these Americans, and we should say again what a heartwarming images these are right now, but who raised concerns about how it was done and fears that it may embolden nations like Iran to do something like this again. So what would your response to that be?
I would say that we really worked hard with Congress to make sure that they were appraised of what we were doing every step of the way. We've been doing that for months. We kind of increased that tempo in the days that were leading up to the exchange. And I'd say that the majority of the people that we talked with seem to be very supportive of the president's effort to bring these people back. In terms of the actual deal, I mean, to my mind, it's this simple. We took money from a restricted account in South Korea that, frankly, the Iranians have had access to. We moved it to a much, much more restricted account in banks in Qatar, where Treasury will very much have oversight over every single transaction being made. And we're restricting it to only being used to buy humanitarian goods like food, medicine, COVID vaccines, baby formula, things like that. And because we allowed that money to go from one account to a much more restricted account, 5 American detainees came home. And I'm sorry, I just think that's a good deal. And I think in terms of, you mentioned the Republicans, a few Republicans spoke out against it. The one thing I can tell you, being in this job for 3.5 years, is this is truly a bipartisan effort. Bringing Americans home is, I would even say, a nonpartisan effort. It's an American problem. It's an American issue. And I think the majority of America is just rejoicing that 5 Americans are now reunited with their families. They're home in freedom. And this is a great day for these families in this country.
Roger, these negotiations take a lot of time. They are incredibly complicated. In this case, there was money as well involved. What do you do about, there are still more American Iranian dual nationals being held in Iran at the moment. There are some Americans being held in Russia, for example, at the moment. What's the strategy? Is each case different? Do you have are you feeling optimistic that you can bring others home, having had a successful reunion today?
I'll answer your last question first. You can't be in this job or do this work unless you're an optimist. So we're always cautiously optimistic. We're going to reach yes on every single deal. You brought up a great point. Every single case is different. It's fascinating how cases might look the same, but when you dig in, there are going to be some differences. But we're working hard on all of them. I can tell you that in terms of bringing people back, we have strategies on the roughly almost 30 cases that we have, and we're pursuing them to include the ones that you mentioned, the ones in Russia. We're also working on deterrence efforts. Tomorrow, Secretary of State Tony Blinken will attend a joint conference that's held with Canada, Costa Rica, Malawi, and the United States, where we're bringing the foreign ministers of many countries, and this will take place in UNGA. And we're going to be talking about how to deter other countries using hostage diplomacy as a tool of diplomacy. So we're hoping that we can keep bringing together countries that can come up with deterrence measures to put this horrible practice on the dustbin of history in the years that come. And maybe the last thing I'll say is we're trying to make sure that people know that there are countries that they should just not go to. For example, if you're a dual American-Iranian citizen, we would kindly ask that you absolutely do not go to Iran. The State Department's put out a D indicator at travel.state.gov warning you of which countries are most likely to deter Americans wrongfully. And we're interested in keeping Americans from going to these countries, but again, also working on a deterrence effort to make this practice go away.
Roger, good morning. You also helped to secure the release of Brittney Griner late last year. So you've been in the inside of many of these negotiations, going back to Russia and the challenges that it poses, which are different than those from Iran, but not totally dissimilar in that it's a difficult negotiation. What is the latest on Paul Whelan? You successfully got Brittney Griner out. Paul Whelan was not a part of that negotiation. Can you tell us anything about him?
You know, I'd love to go into some detail. Sadly, I can't. We're currently taking a lot of diplomatic moves to try to move this forward on Paul Whelan's case. I can tell you that we still routinely talk to Paul's family. I still routinely talk to Paul Whelan. We're keeping them abreast of what we're trying to do. But we've not stopped. We're still working the efforts. We'll be doing some work and some traveling in the upcoming weeks to further Paul Whelan's case. And, of course, we're mindful of Evan Gershkovich. Ambassador Tracy had a chance to go to his hearing yesterday. And I haven't had a chance to talk to her since I just got off the plane after 15 hours. But I'll connect with her today and see how that went. But the president's dead serious about trying to find ways to bring all of these Americans home. Under the Biden administration, we've now brought over 35 Americans home during just over a 2.5-year period. And the president's intent upon making the hard decisions that are required to bring people home to this country.
Yeah, you jumped to my next question, which was about Evan Gershkovich. There was news today that his demand to be released during this pretrial detention period was rejected again today. So I know you all continue to work on that. U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Roger Carstens. Roger, thanks for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Mika?
thank you, Roger.